Why did you choose to use the Scrum framework instead of something like Kanban? If you don't know the answer to this question, you didn't choose it. Someone else chose this framework for you. In this video, I will make the case for Kanban, the pros and cons. How does it compare to Scrum and why you should be using it instead of Scrum, so that maybe, just maybe, you can finally decide on a framework that best suits your team instead of letting someone else decide for you. First, let's talk about Scrum. Why do people use Scrum? The Scrum framework, extremely popular, used by many companies, by many teams. Why do people use Scrum? Many reasons, but one of the main reasons is transparency, increased visibility. The work is visible. I find this reason funny, simply because the work is visible because you're using a Kanban board. Most teams use a Kanban board and that's why their work is visible. And the worst part is that most Scrum teams don't even know why the work needs to be visible. Answer this simple question. Why does the work need to be visible? Why is transparency of a work important? Well, in Kanban, we use the board to visualize work and use this information to try to improve flow. Each piece of work is monitored. Each column is monitored. Aging, extremely important. Work in progress, extremely important. If we feel at any point that the piece of work is taking too long in a column, we can use this information in order to take an action, reduce the scope, remove a bottleneck. This is clearly specified in Kanban. If you read the Kanban guide, compare that to the Scrum guide, there's no incentive to talk about aging. There's no incentive to limit work in progress. Nothing is telling you to do that. And because of that, often Scrum teams ignore flow. The second very common reason why companies and teams use Scrum is that it makes estimations, planning easier. When using Scrum, you have a sprint planning. You go into your sprint planning with a product backlog and you take the priorities from the product backlog, transfer it to the sprint backlog. The team then creates a sprint goal, commits on an amount of work that they believe they will be able to accomplish in the sprint, which will help them achieve the sprint goal. And every 2 weeks, or that's the typical length of a sprint, every 2 weeks, the sprint goal is delivered. An increment of a product, a valuable increment of a product is delivered. This way of doing planning is obviously better than the traditional approach of planning a quarter, planning a year. It's obvious that it's better. But what about estimations? Estimations are not mentioned in the Scrum Guide, the latest version of the Scrum Guide, the Scrum Guide 2020. Nothing related to estimations, but most Scrum teams still estimate the work and believe that Scrum helps them estimate better, because they use something like story points, still not mentioned in the Scrum Guide. You can still use Scrum without estimations. Watch this video for more details. I don't like estimations. I don't like estimating the work. I don't like planning, especially long-term planning, quarterly planning, even sprint planning. Why do we need to do that? For me, it's a complete waste of time. If something is important, truly important for the customer, we should be working on it, right? Why do we need to plan it? Why do we need to estimate it? It's important, let's do it. But instead, most Scrum teams estimate each piece of work. It takes time to estimate each piece of work. They do planning, sprint planning, even sometimes long-term planning. All these are guesses. All these are predictions. But sometimes management, stakeholders believe that these estimations are commitments, and this causes a lot of problems down the line. You can watch this video for more details on why I don't like estimations and what to do instead. I like Kanban better simply because it's a pull system. You pull work when you are available to do the piece of work. So as long as work is continuously flowing into the system, into the flow of work, you don't need to estimate, because once someone is available, they will just pull a piece of work and start working on it. We don't care about estimations. We don't care about planning. Now, let's go through some reasons to use Kanban instead of Scrum. First, you don't want to change. If you don't want to change, you're gonna have a hard time using the Scrum framework. Even though the Scrum Guide, the latest version of the Scrum Guide, is unprescriptive, people say it's unprescriptive, there are still rules, there are still guidelines. And to make matters worse, the Scrum Guide is immutable. If you don't use it as per the guidelines, as per the rules, you might not be able to get the benefits of a Scrum framework. So you need to use it as is, as per the book, which causes some issues for organizations, for companies. The role of a Scrum Master, product owner, needs to be created. People need to learn this role. Events, interaction with stakeholders, many things change throughout the organization when a team uses the Scrum framework. Compare that to Kanban. You just set up a board. Nothing needs to change. You can literally just set up a Kanban board and start using it in 5 minutes. Obviously, you can still change the way you work. You can use the Agile principles, the values, the Agile manifesto, more self-management, less micromanagement, telling people what to do, leaders becoming servant leaders, changing, optimizing your hierarchical structure. You can change all these things, but these have nothing to do with Kanban. Kanban is simple. There's a guide, you follow the guide, you start implementing it in 5 minutes. The second reason to use Kanban instead of Scrum is that it's easy to understand. You can explain Kanban in 5 minutes, in 10 minutes to someone compared to a Scrum framework. A Scrum framework, you need to go to training, at least 1 day of training to understand the Scrum framework. But Kanban, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it's easy to understand, it's intuitive. And maybe many people in your organization are currently using a Kanban board without knowing it with applications like Trello. It's very easy to understand, which is also one of the flaws of Kanban, because it's so easy to understand. People think that Kanban stops at visualization. They don't really follow the rest of the guide on how to optimize flow, limiting work in progress, monitoring the aging of tasks. They just focus on visualization and stop there. The third reason to use Kanban instead of Scrum is responding to change. That's extremely important with agility, adaptability, responding to change. And you can't really do that with Scrum. Scrum, to use it at least correctly, to get the benefits of Scrum, you need to do a sprint planning. You need to commit on a batch of work. You need to commit on a sprint goal. And it's not recommended to change all these things because it disrupts your sprint. So once you commit on a piece of work, batch of work, a sprint goal, you start working on that. And it's recommended not to change anything. It requires a shift in mindset with a team, with stakeholders, with managers, upper management. Compare that to Kanban. You commit on a piece of work once you start a piece of work. Extremely flexible. You can just set up a Kanban board right now, start working on a task, commit on the delivery of this task, and pick up a new one once you're done. Kanban focuses on speed and adaptability. So why not start using Kanban instead of Scrum if you feel that it better suits your team, your organization? Again, use the mindset of Kanban. You don't need to commit to this decision. Experiment with it for a few days, maybe a few weeks. The cool part with Kanban is that you don't need to change much. With your current way of working, with the current structure of your organization, you can just implement a Kanban board and start working. If you feel afterwards that Scrum is better, you go back to Scrum. But at least you tried. So your next step is to watch this video right here, where I go through the Kanban guide. A simple guide, a few pages long. Again, the cool part with Kanban is that it's easy, so easy to understand. You go through each step in the Kanban guide, you set up your board in 5 minutes, you invite everyone, you do a quick training, and you start using Kanban. Your priority when starting out is to focus on the visualization part. Get people used to using Kanban, the flow of work, and then you start looking at aging, you start looking at work in progress limits, you start looking at lead time, so many things to work on, to look at, to monitor, to analyze in order to improve flow, which will result at the end of the day, increments being released more often, customers being more satisfied. So try the switch to Kanban. Experiment with it. If you want more tips, insights on Agile, Scrum, personal growth, click on the video that stands out the most on the screen right now, and I'll see you in a few seconds.